Good evening, Wilderness. This is Pastor Paul with another Midweek Devotion for you. So this week, you'll notice on Sunday, we are going to actually be worshiping with the staff from the East Central Synod of Wisconsin. They've graciously offered a worship service to us, and I don't know about you, but I'm ready for a little change of pace, and who am I to say no to a gift like that? So this Sunday, be on lookout for a link on Facebook for that worship service. So it'll also be on our church's website, Lutheran Church of the Wilderness.com. And if you can't find it, check out my Facebook page. But yeah, it'll be on our Facebook page, on my Facebook page, and I'll also have a link to it on our website. So if you can't find it or don't know what any of those are, don't have access to those, call me up, give me a message in the next couple days, and I'll make sure that you get a link to it as well. So on to our devotion. This evening, our devotion text comes from Genesis chapter 32. It's verses 22 to 31, which is the story of Jacob wrestling at Peniel. So this devotion is actually inspired from some theological reading that I've been doing. So I was rereading M.E. Kegler's One Coin Found. So right there. Zoom in. So you can find it online if you want. Amazon. Take a read of that. It's a very, very compelling book. Has some interesting understandings, and she really does well to dive into Scripture and kind of show it in a new way, sometimes in a deeper meaning than what you may have considered before. And so in there, the author writes about a couple different texts in particular that I was reading today. One with Peter, when he has as she puts it, a nightmare, that God, a sheet descends from heaven with all the unclean foods, and God tells him to eat, and he says, "No, that's unclean." And this happens a couple times, and the fact of what Peter had considered unclean, and God says, "No, do not call what I have made unclean." So kind of changing the dynamics there. But I want to dive into what she follows with after, which is Jacob wrestling with God at Peniel, that story. So a lot of this is inspired by that book. So if you find the subject material interesting, I encourage you to check out that book, and yeah, give it a read. So from Genesis chapter 32. The same night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything that he had. Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved. The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Here ends our reading. So a little backstory with this reading, probably should have done that before reading, is that this story comes right before Jacob is to be reacquainted with Esau, his brother. If you recall from your studies, Jacob and his mother tricked his father into giving the birthright blessings to Jacob instead of Esau. So he received the final blessing instead of his brother, who their father had wanted to give it to. He had worn some clothing with fur on it to disguise his arms, because his brother had very hairy arms. So after he had done this, he ran away because he was afraid of his brother's anger towards him. So as we come upon this reading today, he had decided he needed to finally go back. But before he approached, he sent, as our reading says, he sent his 2 wives, his 2 maids, his 11 children, took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything he had, which was quite a bit. He had amassed quite a substantial amount. He was considered quite rich in that times. So he sent everything ahead of him to try and appease his brother, but he was still worried about how his brother would respond. So we have this, this concern that he has of being reacquainted. And then we come upon our text today, where he wrestles with God, which I think is a really great text for Easter, the season of Easter that we're in, because it shows, Jacob confronting death, the prospect of dying, that maybe not so gracefully as it could be, but it's something that, he deals with. He confronts that notion of death, tries to prolong it a little bit by sending everyone else ahead of him. But he's, we hear that he sends everyone on ahead of him, but he doesn't run away, so he still plans on moving forward. And then after wrestling with God, he does. He goes and he meets his brother. Also seeing that in this wrestling with God, this process of tussling it out, having this difficult situation, he beats God, and he says, when God's like, let go of me, it's time for us to part ways, and Jacob says, not until you bless me. He despite this fear inside him, he is willing to ask that God bless him, and God does. Changes his name from Jacob, meaning trickster and ankle grabber. That's kind of his origin, and changes it to Israel, someone who has striven with God, someone that has experienced that interaction with God. So it goes from being known as a trickster, an ankle grabber, a deviant in many ways, to being someone who has interacted and exchanged with God, which is encouraging for us, I think, in this notion gives us comfort and hopefully the bravery to strive with Jacob through these difficult times. We also see that he is indeed blessed and changed by this process. Changed in, not only in being given a new name, but he's changed in how he lives out his life. We hear that his hip was put out of place, and so he walks with a limp. So his interaction with God is visible. It is something that is life-changing to him, and not only just to him, but it's noticeable by others. This is something that isn't something internal only, but also something that other people will recognize. They'll say, "Man, Jacob has striven with God and won," which is quite an extraordinary thing to wrestle with God and to come out with it, not killed, but not even managing to escape, but to be blessed in that process. And at the end of it, we see that having struggled with God, that Jacob is now, Israel is now ready to face what life has put in front of him. So he's ready to go on to meet with his brother, to accept the fate that awaits him. Even though, he's still scared, he's, still not sure of how his brother will respond, we see that he now has the courage to cross the stream and to meet up with his wives and servants and all of his belongings to meet with his brother. So, which also, you may notice, works well with this situation that we find ourselves in. Social distancing and this time that we have to wrestle with the reality that we find ourselves in. Like Jacob, this isn't something that most people would choose. Being stuck at home, not being able to interact with friends, with family, at least not on the level that we're used to. So it's a difficult time for us. It's a struggle. It's not something that comes easily. And it also, hopefully for us, leads to a new way of life. That we will, like Jacob, be changed from this process. I sincerely hope that after this is all over, and I'm hoping that happens sooner rather than later, but when it is all over, when we all emerge from our homes, when we're all able to gather together again as one community, that we don't just go back to how things had been, that we're able to recognize all the revelations of this time of wrestling with all of this, of striving with God, that we come through it as changed people. Changed in that we appreciate the blessings that we have in our lives with our friends, our family, our church members, our co-workers even, that we recognize what a blessing that is to have those relationships and how much we took those things for granted before. Not being able to interact with them really makes you realize how much you depended on those people in your life. Also, in society, we're definitely faced with the reality that a disease like this can really have devastating effects on our nation, on our economics, on our productivity, kind of the negatives, that we need to be prepared for stuff like this, that it's going to happen again as we become more and more a global world, that we interact with people all over the world, and seeing how interconnected we are, that we need to have measures in place so that we're better prepared for it when it happens again. Not if, but when. So that we don't have to take such extreme measures. That we are better prepared for the next time. If you go back to the way things were, if we ignore what has happened, history is going to repeat itself. And obviously that's something that we want to be able to avoid. But also finally, with recognizing those who are on the front lines, that we take so many people in society for granted. People working at the grocery stores, at the restaurants, the service industry. People that have been deemed as essential. A lot of them, whom we recognize are so essential to the world being able to function, are also the ones that struggle to make ends meet. My mom works at a grocery store, and she's one of the lucky ones because she is a full-time employee. So she actually has health coverage. A lot of her coworkers don't. And that's the case with, restaurants, grocery stores, a lot of those industries. We realize how important they are to us, and yet the policies in place would kind of suggest otherwise. That we see how essential they are, and yet we treat them as though they're completely expendable, that we don't need to honor and respect them. So I'm hoping, moving forward, that we, like Israel, are changed by this experience, that we truly understand what has happened in the tomb, that Christ died for our sins so that we have new life, that we live into that reality by truly becoming a new creation through this process, that we, as Jesus emerged from the tomb, resurrected, ready to lead his people again, that we too emerge from our own tombs, ready to follow Jesus to the ends of the world, ready to show our love for our neighbors, to show care for our neighbors, that we can no longer ignore those who are in need, that we can no longer sit idly by as people suffer and say, well, there's nothing I can do, when in reality there's quite a bit we can do. So kind of deep there for a minute, but that's what we're called to do. If we as Christians are able to go through this process and then immediately go back to the way things used to be, are we really following Christ? Are we really responding to Christ's call? He was willing to die for us, to sacrifice himself for us. Shouldn't we be willing to do the same for others? Recognizing that everyone we meet is a child of God, and therefore holds within them the essence of God, that they are holy and sacred and deserving of respect and of a decent life. So, blessings to you in this Easter season. I hope that you will continue to follow along with us, to continue worshiping with Wilderness. If this is your first time viewing one of these videos, welcome. But I hope that this can be a time in your week to contemplate how you are being changed in this process. So, blessings to you.